introduce. So Teresa, she had me on one of her podcasts, and we just got talking afterwards, which I find happens all the time. I just find I make friends with all these really interesting people. But Teresa really stood out to me with some of the things she was sharing about her thoughts around water, and coming from her own perception, as well as some Indigenous perspectives and her relationship with nature. I think that we'll find that she brings a new energy to this webinar. And I'm really excited to hear your talk, Teresa, and I'm really grateful for you coming on. So feel free to take it from here. Let me just spotlight you now, and I'll pop myself on mute so you can't hear all my noises going on from my computer.
Thank you so much, Veda. I'm really, really, truly honored to be here, that you invited me to this wonderful webinar and to be honored with all the wonderful speakers here today. There's so much to water that is just amazing, and it just keeps growing, right? And yeah, this is just going to be storytelling time about, I don't have a presentation to share, and feel free to chime in, Veda, like we did in our conversation. And it's storytelling, and it's about my awakening to water, in the last few years, how it just really has, amplified my consciousness, my growth, my evolution. And thank you for having me. And let me just say a little bit about myself. From my perspective, I am rooted in, my heritage is Mexican from my mother's side. She was born and raised in Mexico, and Basque heritage from my father, which, if you're not familiar with that, Basque people are a very unique, distinct ethnic group in the north of Spain and south of France. And we are different language as well, and is the oldest language in Europe. It's not related to anything else, not related to the Indo-European languages or anything like that. So we're like speaking of mysteries, we're the mysterious people of Europe. And I was born here in California in the Bay Area, but I grew up in Spain. So I am rooted in nature, like how the Basque culture is, in mythology, and then learning my Mexican side once I came back to the United States. And today I live here. I am halfway between the San Francisco Bay Area, close to my beloved Redwoods. I was born in Redwood City. So the Redwoods, I'll talk more about them, how they fit in with water, actually with fog and water, and the Pacific Ocean, and my beloved Yosemite, the mountains, our water source here in the Central Valley and most of California, just magnificent mountains. I can see the snow and the clouds on top of them, from here. So, and that's one of my topics that I'm going to be talking about, the clouds. So just give you a little bit background on myself. So you know where I come from, and these are my experiences, my awakening to water, me doing, learning from different indigenous traditions from the Aztec, Toltec, Mayan within my heritage of Mexico, and then also the Andean people of Peru, studying with them, and the Lakota from here, the United States. I have been participating in their rituals, especially Sweat Lodge, for the last 8 years. So water is just been a big awakening in my life. So just having said that, I just want to, again, thank you everybody for tuning in here. And the big topic, or I guess a big drop that I had, or a download, it was about water as being the ultimate shapeshifter. And as we know, and to me, I call it the ultimate shaman, because that's, yeah, it changes form, state of being, mostly the 3 stages that we know, and then the 4th stage of water. But it goes in between worlds. It goes the lower world, the middle world, the upper world. The lower could be in liquid form, or, snow compacted, going underneath. On the middle world will be also solid or liquid or even vapor, and then it rises up to the upper world in the vapor form and the gas form. So it transforms constantly. And then is healing in every form as well. And what is a shaman? Shaman is a healer that goes in between worlds. It goes between the visible world and the spirit world. And I know you talk so much about water being the spirit, or the hydrogen in the water, how Isabel Friend mentions that, like repeatedly says, is spirit. So that is such a huge like download. I call it drops, that I get drops from water about, yeah, is the shamanic practice, and water is there. It transforms itself, and it transforms everything it comes in contact with. Our bodies of water, the landscapes, like I said, I can see now, I can see how it transforms when it's in the land and where there's lack of water. The desert on the other side of the Sierras is high desert land, and it's been landscaped by the water, and Death Valley is right next to it with a lack of water. So you can see it in every landscape. And funny thing, I settled here a couple of years ago, and the city call is Riverbank. Even the water is just like everywhere, and because a major river coming from the Sierras goes through here, so we are the city at the riverbank of the Stanislaus River. So just being in contact with water, and not only in contact, but really in a deep, intimate connection, as water being the creatrix, because water is life. And that is, it's been such an awakening experience. It's been in relation to nature, seeing water, and then it's been reflecting within us, our bodies, our womb, where we create life. It's held in water. And, we live in the water, the planet water, even though it's called Earth, it's just such a awakening to it that is a really it's taking me in a deep dive on a spiritual journey with water. And it's just been amazing to receive these drops and downloads from the water that has been opening so many portals to me. And that's why I call her the ultimate shapeshifter, the ultimate creatrix, and the shaman that guides me and others. If you're open to it, it can guide you in between those worlds to discover amazing, amazing connection with nature, and also ultimately within yourself, So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like that we can have conversation together whilst you're talking as well, because I know that you like that too. But one of the things that you came up with that just fascinated me was this kind of idea of we kind of are creating, using technology, things that are also potentially happening in nature. And for example, the cloud. So if you want to talk about that part.
Oh yeah, that was such a moment. Like, I call it a download, and it kind of started like, and I have the dates because I journal all these things, because it didn't just happen like right there. It was like little bits that then connected, and it like, whoa, like I had this major insight. So as is the clouds as the host of all consciousness. So in September, the story starts like in September 2016. I was at a university, and we had a group where we had monthly wisdom calls. And in that call, I happened to talk about how the clouds cover the mountains. And he said that mountains communicate via clouds. And also that's why they have pyramids and clouds to like reach up to the heavens and to connect that. And the clouds are the travelers that bring all these energy and information and knowledge and consciousness from around the world, and they keep going and at it. And then so that was that, and that was like, I was something like was really tugging at me, that really stood out. And then like a month later, I was attending a Andean tradition, Andean ceremony with a shaman from Peru. Here's the shaman, the shapeshifter again. And he says something that we develop the technology before we evolve into it. And that really, he mentioned, for example, like, the plane, the flying, we copy nature, what they're doing, and then we developed the technology before we evolved into it. So that was a little, another nugget there, another drop that was adding on. And one of the beautiful things of the Andean Peruvian tradition is that their language is also very conscious. And they have, like, for example, the word that stood out to me is apu, which means mountain spirit, not mountain, but mountain spirit, because they're connected with nature, and they give names to what the living being is. So that was the connection with the Peruvian tradition of, like, we developed the technology before we evolved into it. And also in part of the ceremony, as an offering, we were giving 3 leaves or a local tree here. And this ceremony was by the ocean in Santa Cruz in California. So, and to make the offering, you say your name and the place of birth to the leaves to present to put in the altar. And that also dawned on me. And I said, Teresa Echaide from Redwood City, because your first breath, where the place that you're born, you're connected to that forever. That's your location. And what is breath? Breath is water, vapor, and that's our bodies of water. So I was like, oh my gosh, like huge, like huge. I was like, all these things. And then back then I used to work in corporate in a high-tech company in the Silicon Valley, large company. And I was just more like the secretary, but I was in meetings, and everything back then was the cloud, the cloud, the cloud. And I did not understand the technology. And, they're talking, and I was at a meeting, I was daydreaming about all these things, about mountains, clouds, and the cloud just kept poking at me. And I'm like, cloud. I'm like, oh my God, the cloud. I'm like, what is the cloud? The cloud is the technology, is the ability to store and access data over the web from anywhere, anything, any data from anywhere in the world. And I was like, well, the cloud is more than that, that's what we're creating. So, but to me, the cloud, because what is the cloud? Physical form is water vapor made visible, and it's a combination of all the 3: liquid, solid, and gas. And again, there we go with the shapeshifter and the shaman. And the consciousness is the awareness of every experience. So for me, it was the download. Oh my gosh, we're going from the web to the cloud. The web is here, anyone, anywhere can access any information. And the cloud, to me, was like anyone, anywhere can access any consciousness, not just human, but any living consciousness. So it's like us above and below, a reflection of it. So the clouds are bringing that consciousness. And for example, what is it to say? And to me, it's like, we are all here in this Zoom meeting. And as we hear different speakers, we may have aha moments, something that we resonate with, and it's in this container. But what is it to say, like when we put that consciousness on the cloud, somebody across the world who's not in this meeting is having the same aha moment because they heard something in relation to water, So to me, is that the cloud is the next stage in evolution, where we all share a personal consciousness on the cloud, and anyone can access it from anywhere in the world.
No.
It's more an awakening of consciousness as being the next evolutionary step for humans, and where the consciousness is available to all, the entire living conscious field, not just the human. And it will help spread the consciousness throughout the world via the clouds, via the water, in the new Aquarian age.
Thank you. I'm just wanting to make sure that that person's muted. Can everybody just make sure they're on mute? There was someone who wasn't on mute. We could just hear coming through. And any co-host can change it. I'm just trying to record this really well so that people get the best recording. So I can't put anyone on mute whilst I'm doing this, but the co-hosts can, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, great. So yeah, to me, it's like helping like the mountains communicate via clouds. Like, the consciousness is being uploaded here in these clouds where we can access it if through nature connection, through water connection, and to, for the like the Aquarian age, we're the water carriers. So the water has the wisdom to guide us back home to our soul and to our true essence. And that was like my big aha with the cloud. I'm like, yes, because that has connected us, the cloud, the technology that has made meetings like these so much easier. It's like now let's up level it to their consciousness.
I think that's such an amazing insight that you've had. I'm curious about the relationship between the redwoods and the water, because I have this really special place in Rotorua where there's these beautiful springs, and one of the unusual parts or special parts about the area is that there's a little redwood forest, and the redwoods and this incredibly clear, beautiful spring, they just seem to go together. And so I'm very curious about your insights into the connection between them.
Yeah, to me, the redwoods are so special. Like I say, they are only here in the Pacific coast, and California and Oregon are the tallest trees in the world. And they have relatively shallow roots for being the tallest tree in the world. But the amazing thing about them, that's why they are by the coast, because they receive the water from springs underground, but mostly from the fog. That's why the coastal areas, if you come in the summer, if you know San Francisco is always in fog in the wind in the summer, it's not hot, it's cold. There's a lot of fog that just comes in, and those water droplets just are absorbed by the redwoods. And I love it because, like scientists don't really know or understand how the water from the roots is just rising up through the trunk and throughout the tree. I love it because these trees are receiving it both. They're, above and below from the roots and the crown. And that's where they're so majestic. And I've had a lot of experiences in the redwoods. That's where I have most of my creative drops come in. I had uh I've done retreats. I've guided people in retreats in the redwoods, and they're just like I said, it's just like a forest, a fantasy forest to me. And I've had like downloads and drops of poems that just instantly like came. And also I've had a lot of beautiful experiences. There's a retreat center, Big Sur, where I had like I call it my like a rebirth because I was in the water. Is redwood forest, and then you have a retreat center, and there's the ocean. So there's the three waters: the ocean, the hot springs, and then there's a creek. And I was at the hot spring, and it's a full moon, and it happened on Earth Day. Seriously, couldn't get it any more. Like everything just lined up, and it was my 40th birthday, and it was just like, oh my gosh, that's like I'm in the hot water. I'm like, I'm in the womb of the mother right here. And that having that fresh energy from the water and the redwoods, it was like I'm birthing myself again, It's that energy that follows me from my place of birth. And even though I lived somewhere else in Spain, but coming back and reconnecting with that is just pure magic. And the water is what connects us.
Are there any from your places of birth and from your heritage, going back, because this is about more like some of the ancient mysteries, and I'll kind of like reiterate something that Robert said as well about this kind of like something about it being in the past and the present. But it's interesting, this idea about the future is ancient. And so I'm curious what the relationship, if you know very much from your Mexican heritage or your, is it Basque heritage?
Basque.
Basque, what has been handed down through the ages about the sacredness of water.
Yeah, on that one also I had the download about, water memories written in water. because you always hear about it's written in the stars as a future event, like something that happened in the future. I'm like, so well, it's written in water, and water, as we know, the memory that it carries, but also it tells us the past, but also carries information and the wisdom codes, wisdom drops, water drops, downloads, everything that you want to call it, through nature, through everything, the water droplets, the clouds, the mist, the fog. So it's connecting us to our inner source. You talk about water as source and that inner source. So that innate wisdom that comes through us. And to speak of my cultural background, I want to speak a little bit of the language, because through one of my retreats also that I attended in Mount Shasta here in California, our teacher mentioned about conscious language, how a lot of the indigenous languages are conscious. They name things according to their landscape. There's not, so for example, in the Basque language, we have ancient roots, and we're really people of the forest. But water, you say water means ura, which also means living matter. So you have that connection with the water is the living matter. And from that word, you have lur, which means earth. So something else, elur, snow, euri, rain, but then also goes into fire, because sur is wood and egura is firewood. And that comes back, I listened to your talk the other day, I think it was with Heather, about the fire and the water coming together. And I have a lot of that with my experiences. And that's what in the Basque tradition, in the language, it comes through it. And even the names of rivers or springs is a reflection of the place, and water is in it. And then from the Mexican side, they have this Aztec and the Mayan, they're very different, but on the Mayan side, the pyramid of Chichen Itza means at the mouth of the well of the Itza. And the Itza were the ethnic group who ruled at that time, and they're the water wizards or the water enchanters. And the Mayan word water is H-A, ah. Like, conscious language, we just say ah, like, and then in Spanish we have agua. There's a lot of vowels in these. And then the Mayans have the sinkholes which are sacred to them, the cenotes, where that's the water source. So it was like underground source. There's a lot of water there underground. So to name a place, a pyramid that is, very old and still standing today, at the mouth of the well of these water wizards, I mean, it tells you the power of the place, and then also words in Spanish, which is now the Basque Country, Spain took over, so Spanish is the main language. Same thing with Mexico. Spanish is the language that we speak today. So for example, in Spanish, another word too, the word fountain, which you say fuente, means source. I mean, like when you ask somebody what's your source of income, it's like fuente of, your money. And, my fuente broke, my fountain broke, like my water broke, so I find that the connection of the languages of conscious language, a lot of water connection, and just weaving the water as a main character here in the story, And the other part of me that I've been studying, or because also as a Californian, as a native Californian, I pay respect to the people who were here before, the natives who are here, who are still here. They're not gone. And learning about them and the sacredness of the lands, because they're stewards of the lands. And I'm doing whatever I can to help them in that effort. And let me just share a couple of tribes that I've kind of come in close contact with and study them. And one of them I did send you remember I did send you a video of a film that was made. It was amazing. Is in Mount Shasta, here is one of the powerful mountains we have here in Northern California. If you are familiar with Mount Shasta, there's a lot there. I mean, besides being said to be the root chakra of the world, the Lemurians, all kinds of stuff. They're always covered in clouds, these funny clouds, and all kinds of, you know, uh, things happening there, a spiritual world. So in Mount Shasta, the wisdom keepers are in the tribe of Winnemem Wintu. And there was this beautiful film done, and the title of it was Sawa Mem, Sacred Water. So they use them at that's their language, but also the mem, like memory and water, how we're talking about. Yes, and yes, and the Klamath River dam removal so the salmon can come back. That has happened, and we're like so happy and proud of that. And so with this film that was made, it was to help change the misconception of water as a resource to water as a sacred life giver. And that is in alignment with you, Veda, how you talking about water being a source, sacred life giver, not a resource.
Oh, there's so much wisdom in that. And as you were talking about the language, I saw someone say something, I think I read that in Hawaiian, awa is breath, I think. But in Maori language, awa is river.
Mm.
So you talk about a conscious language, I think a lot of tribes can understand each other based on some of even in Japan, and I'm going to talk soon, but I'll talk a little bit about a story about the kauri tree, and that's a sacred New Zealand tree, and its relationship with water and whales. And I was going somewhere with that, but it's kind of like, I'm sure it will come to me in just a second, because we were talking about the connection between the languages. But I think when you start realizing that the kauri tree, this word Kauri, when I lived in Japan, the word for kauri and another word rimu, often common names to call women. So it's like, all around Japan, I know somebody called Rimu and I know somebody called Kaori. It's like, where did you get these names from? And so there are these overlays with language that fascinate me.
Yes, definitely. And once you start seeing these, you can't stop. Then like you're just sharing right now. So that is adding on to what I've already seen within just my heritage and other languages, the language that I speak. Like Spanish is my first language, and not so much with English. I mean, we have a lot of modern language of English that reference to water, the watering hole, the watering cooler, like, go with the flow, I'm drowning in debt, and all these things that, but it's not like consciousness that will take you to another level. Another one of the tribes here is in the Eastern Sierra, which is behind Yosemite, is the home of the Paiute and Shoshone peoples. And it's a valley. So because they have on the west, they have the Sierra, and then on the east, they have the White Mountains. So rich, a lot of water. And the local name is Place of the Flowing Water, which is Paya Unadu. And, it's reflective of the abundant water flowing down from the mountains. And the word for water for them is Paya. So this is, and I don't know if people may be familiar with here, California, how we always on a drought, it's either fire or flooding and all these things happening, but it's very interesting. I'm not going to get into that, but like water from these mountains get also bottled up by the corporations and sell it somewhere else, and the source is right here in our mountains. And then we're talking about drought. I mean, somebody's stealing our water, so it's just really interesting and how those go together. And yeah, on the language, it just becomes so clear to me that is the consciousness of it is not a coincidence that all these languages, all these natives have named their places according to, you know, the water. And of course, they build these pyramids and important places, sacred places for them next to the sacred waters that they are in their environment.
Come off. So the lady was saying, and in Hawaiian, ha. I thought that was right. Ha is breath, which is like water and breath. So I was thinking it wasn't like I thought I didn't think awa was correct, but it's ha. So it's like it's a very special word, ha. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot there, and I think what some of the takeaways, and I'd like to like just reiterate some of the things that you've said that highlight a lot of what has been something I've said around water as a shapeshifter. I think that we tend to consider ourselves um, as the definition of what we contained in. But like I say, to children, if your skin was invisible and your organs were see-through, what would you look like? And perhaps we have all of the, well, I think we have the qualities of water. So water is able to shapeshift from one stage to another stage, and it's quite aware of that. And I'm going to more explain that in my presentation. But I think what you're also saying is like just that observer of this shapeshifter, this idea of the ultimate shaman between worlds. Water seems to be able to be between worlds at all times, instantaneously. It's always communicating with itself. And I think that that lends into such a lot of what you've said. The idea of there's you worded it so well, and I think I wrote it down amongst all of this here. But you talked about the clouds as these travelers, these message travelers, as this memory holding traveler that stores information. And I mean, we're surrounded by clouds right now in New Zealand, and it actually looks like it might rain. And I think that viewing it in these ways, it's like, well, you don't see so many clouds, you know, in California, because I spent a little bit of time there, and with many cloudless days, like, you know, what do you think about that idea of like, if there's no clouds in one giant city, hardly ever any clouds? What do you think that reflects?
Yeah, well, it depends where you are in California, but when I look east to the mountains, there's snow and there's cloud. They're full of clouds. It's very clear here, but up there in the mountains. So I think it is into nature. I mean, the cities are man-made. You know, maybe the clouds come with the rain and that's it, come and go. But like the clouds, like I mentioned, is like how the mountains communicate via clouds. That's where the clouds are. And if you've been to Mount Shasta, or if you look at Mount Shasta, cloud formations is just like phenomenal over there. So it's in relation to the natural places, mostly the mountains. And that's how, you know, and then of course, then from the mountains, what happens, you know, you get the rain or the snow, and it comes into our water cycle. You know, our water here comes from the mountains up there in the Sierra. So the clouds are the travelers that they hold all the consciousness, but then it brings into the fresh water. And then whatever water we get after whatever happens is different story, or whatever in the city, you know, by the time the water travels to the city, it's gone through a lot of other things, you know. But the clouds are connected to the mountains throughout the world in pyramids. That's why there have been places of ceremony and sacredness, because the connection that they bring with the rest of the world, with other ceremonies. You know, we see familiar things of the ancient wisdom of the Mayans. Same, for example, there's a lot of similarities too with other traditions in Europe or Egypt, you know, that has to do reflecting the cosmos of the sky with the earth.
I love that.
And I believe the clouds are the messengers of that.
I think that's wonderful insights. Yeah, and I think it's really good to be reminded, because I tend to ask questions that other people might ask, not necessarily the ones that I just ask a lot of questions I know other people will ask. But I think that's probably why it's so important for us to get out into nature and to actually breathe it in. One of the things that happens when I go to this special place in Rotorua with the redwood trees and the spring is that when you go into the trees, it already feels colder. You feel this kind of fogginess as you walk through them. It's almost like the trees are partially creating some of the fog. And I think there is a deep connection between water and trees and seeds, which I'm going to get into later. But
Oh, can I say something about that? Because I watched your talk with Heather earlier this week. And yes, so the seeds, I mean, I just had like, when you talked about that, it's like, there's this saying that it keeps coming up a lot, especially with the indigenous people of Mexico, or even I heard it with other tribes here in the US. Like the saying is like, they thought they buried us, but they didn't realize we were the seeds. As far as like, you know, what happened with when Spain came over and all these things. And so water those seeds, and also the seeds, and like you mentioned, water and fire. The redwood trees, that's how they spread their seeds. The fire opens up the cone and it releases the seeds. So all these fires that people are like seeing, like that's what happens. I mean, now it's a massive scale because nobody's tending to the land like the natives used to do here in California. The forests are vast, and you know there's been overgrowth and all kinds of other animals and stuff like that, but we do need the fire to spread those seeds and continue growing, you know, these trees. And I'm really happy. And I mean, trees are like, I have one here. Trees are really, water and trees are like my best friends, and I have so many deep connections with both of them. The other thing, one exercise that I do when I'm in nature, connecting with nature, and I started doing this probably like 6, 8 years ago, that it has helped me a lot. So I will be hiking in the mountains and I will come to a stream, a waterfall, some kind of body of water. I will always take off my hiking shoes and my socks and put my feet in water. I'm grounding in water. And those are those connections, the water and the trees. And grounding in water, no matter how cold it is, because in the mountains, even if it's hot in summer, it's a snow melt. But it feels so like awakening and accelerating. That water is just like so, it's pure. It's just so pure. It's just, you know, it was a snow melt. It was a snow like 24 hours ago. So I ground in water that way. Everywhere I go, if I go in the ocean and, you know, out up in the mountains, that's what I do. That's my grounding in water, you know, practice.
oh, I'm sure that when you're speaking to so many people that probably love to do that and will take that advice if they don't, because there is nothing quite like it to really make you feel better. You know, even for a simple headache, just going and putting your feet in a stream, you'll be amazed how quickly that can get rid of it. So I want to thank you so much for speaking today and sharing your wisdom with us. I really, really do appreciate it, Teresa. And for anyone that wants to connect with you, I will make sure that people will have your contact details when I send out the recording. So
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I love these and listening to everybody speak as well. And I love somebody's like the sequoias are the three rivers. There's so much here in California, you know, it's not just Hollywood stuff. So come visit the redwoods, the sequoias, Yosemite, the ocean, everything, Mount Shasta. Thank you so much, Veda, for having me here and sharing my experience and, you know, what I have experienced on my awakening to water. That's why we're here. I appreciate you.
oh, thank you. And it's interesting because although I haven't been to Mount Shasta, I've spoken to many people who have, as I'm sure you have, and they talk about it in a very Lemurian sense, and that there's some records of people who were quite tall wearing certain robes in the kind of earlier 19th century, like earlier, like I can't remember, 18 or 1920 or whenever it was, they were actually going and paying with gold coins, and that were looked a certain way, looked slightly different. And there's a lot to kind of suggest, well, verbal suggestions, handed down verbal suggestions, which is such a lot of Indigenous wisdom, you know, handed down stories, which are told from person to person. So, but some people have told me about beings that live inside of Mount Shasta and come out sometimes. And I'd love to talk to anybody who has had an experience like that, because it seems people have experienced many, many things about Mount Shasta, as somebody saying it's their power spot. I'm not surprised. I'm really excited to go one day. All right.